Hi, this is Ed Mulder from IBM, from the channel architecture team. Today I'm going to talk about how to use the IoT platform on Bluemix and integrate it with a sensor, collect the readings, and create a chatbot so we can understand the data that's been collected. To do this, we're going to leverage a recipe from IBM developerWorks. The recipe that we're going to use is talk to your sensor using the Watson IoT platform and conversation services. You can go to developerWorks and look it up. I have it on the screen right now. But the recipe is going to walk us through about how we actually set up a sensor on the IoT platform, how to use Node-RED to build the application to capture that data, and then use Node-RED to actually put the data into a DB2 warehouse. And then finally, we're going to build a Watson conversation so we can ask, about the sensor data that's been collected. For instance, we could ask questions about, what was the average temperature, what was the average light reading, and we'll talk a little bit more about the sensor that we're going to use as we get going. At the end of creating this recipe, I'm going to show you how I actually have taken the recipe and actually have expanded it to include additional capabilities. So with that, let's get started. So to do this project, one thing that you're going to need is an actual sensor. Now, the recipe calls to use a Texas Instrument CC2650 sensor. You can go out to the Texas Instrument website and look it up. It costs approximately $30 US. This sensor has the ability to capture ambient temperature, infrared temperature, humidity, movement, as well as sense the strength of the light. So before you get started, you need to do this. You can use another sensor, but as you'll see, you might have to make some changes to modify the recipe depending on what that sensor actually captures. For instance, if it only captures temperature, you're going to have to make some minor changes in this, as you move forward. So once you have your sensor, then you can get started with the recipe, which, let's move on to that. Okay. First thing that we need to do in the recipe is we want to go to Bluemix. If you don't have a Bluemix account, this is a time to set one up. You want to go to the catalog and you want to search for Watson IoT or Internets of Things Platform Starter. And you want to click on that. You're going to want to create a name for your application. Do something like, talk to sensor, maybe put the date. Each name in a Bluemix application has to be unique. So let's see, today is the 7th, 2017. That'll give you a unique name. Go ahead and create it. Okay, now that we have our application created, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to connections, and we're going to want to create a connection to the DB2 data warehouse. I've actually already created one, so when I click on create connections, we will see it, and it's right here. So I go ahead and connect, and we're going to be asked to restage. If you didn't create it, go back to the catalog, search for the DB2 warehouse, and go ahead and create a service. When you received your sensor, you should have followed the instructions and installed the app. You can see it right here. So you're going to want to look at that. And you want to make sure your sensor is running. There's my sensor. And here's, you can see my sensor. You can see it's up and running. It's temperature, humidity, there's a barometer, movement, etc. One of the pieces of information that you're going to want, you're going to want to go to cloud configuration. You're going to see there's a device ID. Now, I already have this registered, but let me go in and show you. You'll see there's a device type, which is this TI-sensor tag 2. Here's the device ID. You're going to need both pieces of information because our next step is to go into the IoT platform and set up the device and get what's known as an authentication token, which is right there. So you want to go back to your application, go to the connections, and you're going to want to click on the IoT platform that was created when you created the application. So double click on that. Click on launch. So after you launch, you'll come to the IoT platform screen. You'll want to go into the device screen. First thing we're going to have to do is we're actually going to have to add the device type. Click here. You'll remember when we looked at the sensor on your smartphone app, it was called TI sensor tag 2. You don't have to worry about the metadata. Okay, now that you've done that, we want to register a device. And again, we go back to your app and just simply enter the device ID that we found in the configuration. It's very important that you enter it accurately or your sensor will not work properly. All right, again, we can skip the metadata. All right, what we don't want to skip is when you finish this, it's going to create an authentication token. So go ahead and do that. All right, very important, you'll want to copy this and place it someplace, because once we leave the screen, you won't be able to get it back and you'll have to go through the process again. Believe me, I've done this several times. As you can see, non-recoverable. So, so next thing what we want to do, we want to go back to our smartphone, because now we want to set this up. So let's do that. Okay, reached a point where we're going to take a pause, and we will carry on in part 2. So we have 2 reasonably sized videos. So I will pick this up and see you in part 2. Thank you.